I just want to say thank you for listening to another episode of conversations that are far below surface level. The conversations that we have on Real Talk for an Unreal World are deep, and they're meant to be, because it's my belief that we have avoided having deep conversations, which is basically just being authentic and just being ourselves and speaking our truth, because we are trying to please other people and be accepted by an idea of what is normal. And I feel like it's this idea of normal that has led people to hide from their emotions and fear their difficult experiences and sharing about them and stepping into vulnerability. My guest in this episode is Jennifer Riggs. She is the author of the book Free from the Cage. She has a wealth of knowledge surrounding tools and education on how to grow through difficult experiences, how to see your experience as something that has happened for you, so we can pull education out of the difficulties to allow ourselves to process it and let it go. And I think for a lot of people, we question as to where to begin when we're discussing a journey within. And in this episode, we offer the tools and the understanding of where to begin. I hope you enjoy this episode as much as I did having the conversation. And to be honest with you, all of the episodes, I just bring guests on that can help you grow through your difficulties in this life. That's all I care about, is for us to be able to connect with each other and learn from each other and apply that education into our own lives to help us grow through what holds us back. Much love. I had a chance to look into Free from the Cage. I didn't get the whole book, but I got the gist of most of it, and it's a lot of similarities, the language that we use. And I think that that's an extremely beautiful part of the inner work that goes into people, and then meeting people along our path, is that you begin to see that love is a language that you use, and it's used towards yourself, the language of self-love for sure, but then when you communicate that with other people, there's just a shift in frequency. So I'm grateful to have met another one.
Yeah, I noticed that too. I kind of was listening to some of your previous podcasts and things, and I was like, oh, we say a lot of the same things. So I thought that was a great connection.
Absolutely. And I think that, the conversations that are being born from experiences that have alchemized dense energies into a higher vibrational frequency are the ones that are getting slightly louder, and people are able to connect in their own personal lives. Because I know for me, I felt very alone in the beginning.
Mhm.
Certainly coming out of a 23-year drug addiction. I mean, there wasn't many people around me that were doing the same thing. And if they were so recovery based. They were limited within their thinking and their feeling. They were in this place of recovery. And for me, I was like, well, like I'm not there. Like that's not where I want to be. I want to go as far as I can in this life. I don't want to limit myself.
Mhm.
So I know that finding people that were speaking this way was, I guess it just wasn't my time. At the time, I want to say it was difficult. That's what I was gonna say, and it was friggin' difficult because you're alone with these feelings, and then you got to try and connect that with other human beings. But I think that that's where the work still needs to take place within you.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. You don't want to get to I don't think we're ever like at the destination as long as we're here. We have to keep going, just always keep going and keep progressing and working towards healing. We all have it. We all need it.
Yeah, I think that a lot of people ask me how I made it through that 23-year drug addiction, and I often reflect on it now. And I think like some of the situations that I was in, like where you would walk outside in the winter for like, 15 kilometers, like in a pair of wet shoes, and the perseverance even through drug addiction. And I think that this is a good awareness to bring to people that have an idea of what drug addiction is, like the perseverance and strength that comes through an individual that can put their body and their mind and their soul through so much stress and discomfort that you do keep going. And I think that my wife says that to me today too. She's like, you just never give up. Like you never give up with anything you do. And I'm like, I've always been like that. Like even if I had to walk 15K in the winter with wet shoes, I just never gave up.
That's such a great quality to have. If you give up so easily, then where are you going to go from there? You've got to keep going. And I really admire that. I admire where you've come and how much you've done to get here. It's really impressive. It really is.
Yeah, but I think like really like I'm not special and I'm not unique. I think even now, I'm just thinking about it right now. And when I was in drug addiction, like I was like, okay, what did push me to always do these things? Well, I believed in the drugs. I believed in the medication that was found within the drug that would heal me from the uncomfortable feelings I was facing. So there was always a belief system, and I think that that was the catalyst that always pushed me through.
Yeah, believing in the numbing agent
Yeah.
is one way to go, and that's what a lot of people are walking around doing. But if you believe in the actual process of healing, how much better that is. It's such a shift and a much better place to be. So yeah.
I guess I'm just grateful for my story, like for people to be able to connect with that aspect and say, hey, like, here's a guy who did walk out of, all of that addiction just by believing in himself. Because I think the belief systems get obstructed when we're looking for an example of what to lead by. And in my life, how I did it was, to be honest with you, the only thing I really looked to the spiritual teachers for, like Buddha, Allah, Krishna, Jesus, big one for me, is just an example of a life. Because I was struggling to like I knew who I wanted to be and what I wanted to do, but I knew that I needed something to have an example of what that would look like, and that's where my spiritual teachers come into play for me. That was the only function that they really had, was to teach me a way to live my life by.
Yeah. That's just so amazing that you have been able to pull out of all of that. And I love that you're helping others now with everything that you've learned and what you're continuing to learn. It's wonderful.
I think that's the power of freeing yourself from the cage.
Yeah, it sure is. It's a process. It really is. People think that you're going to just get out just because you decide. You have to decide and then you have to do all the things.
Yeah.
And those things are feeling what you really feel and stop trying to hide the feelings. It sounds like that was maybe what you were trying to do, and everybody has their own way of doing that. And I do talk about that in my book about how it comes out in different ways for people. It's alcohol, it's drugs, it's shopping, it's gambling, it's um, eating disorders, or whatever we choose to do instead of walking through that healing. And it's such a better way to actually start to feel instead of avoid.
Yeah, like the shopping and the food and the social media and the video games and the movies and all of these things, the drugs, the gambling, the alcohol, whatever it may be. These are distractions and they work very, very well because they can pull our attention away from the uncomfortable feelings that we're afraid to feel. And I think that the fear resulting in processing emotions comes from the lack of conversation surrounding the ability to understand our emotions through communication and through connection. So
Mhm.
I feel like that's where a big disconnect is happening and why we have these external sources from us that are so readily available to mask those symptoms.
I think people are just scared really of actually feeling what they feel. And when I work with somebody, I tell them, it's going to be painful for a little bit while we work through it,
Yeah.
but isn't it better to feel the pain for a moment than a lifetime? So if you can face whatever it is, if there's something in your past that's holding on to you and creating this desire to numb and hide from whatever you feel, just face it. And like you said, don't give up, just keep pushing through and you'll get to the other side.
And I think like short-term pain for long-term gain. But it's so incredible how, myself included, I did this as well. I was willing to carry that pain for such a long time because I just didn't want to address it in that moment. And I think of it now, and the more conversations I have with people is I believe that we just don't have a language for, even if we're ready, like let's say, okay, I'm ready, I'm tired, I'm sick and tired of being tired and sick, I want to let this go. They've they or we have become so disconnected from what that core root issue is, that when we even try to have a language for the discomfort feeling that we initially had that began all of this other emotional distress, we lack the understanding of how to communicate about that. And I think that that was a big one for me, was like, where do you begin, you know?
I personally think that we should be teaching emotional processing in school as regular curriculum starting from kindergarten and every year forever on, because we don't know how to feel our feelings and to process things. And that's where most of the trouble of the world comes from, I think. Because like you said, if you don't have the tool or the understanding of how to, it's easier to just avoid it or numb it than to actually face it, because it's like, okay, is somebody saying my car is broken, but I don't know how to fix a car, so I'm just going to let it be broken.
Right.
We need some tools, and I think that would be so helpful if it became a priority for everyone to start understanding how to process their feelings.
Yeah, the education system, I believe, is a catalyst in the imbalance of an emotional understanding of oneself. And the reason I believe that is because of the way we're graded, and because of the ideology that is praised for what one may conceive as intelligent or smart. So if you've got, say 6% of a classroom in grade one, from grade one forward, feeling intelligent or smart because they're praised due to what the report card or how the teacher, has to give them more attention or less attention based on their understanding of the education that's being fed to them. You got 94% of kids with an emotional instability in an understanding of themselves being dumb or not being able to understand the information being fed to them. And I think when we look at that, like immediately the child begins to disassociate from itself and feels, a debilitation in self-worth. And their self-confidence goes down, their self-esteem goes down. And these behaviors are implanted in say a 6 and 7 year old, but they're grown very quickly as we move through the education system, and we begin to see that other children advance faster than most of the other kids. So you've got collections of kids that are feeling, a disconnection from value and worth within themselves.
Yeah, everybody learns in a different way too. And like you said, if it only fits a certain percentage of the kids, then it's going to be a struggle for those others. And they're going to feel that, like you said, that self-worth kind of being chipped away. And the reality is our view of ourselves in the world starts around age 4 or 5 up until about age 8. So in that very critical time, if we're in the classroom and learning that the way that we learn doesn't actually work, it's going to set that pattern in our life, and we can walk through life going, I don't know how to do anything, or I'm, like you said, like stupid, or whatever that narrative is that you start adapting to. And then that just grows as you get older.
Yeah, the reason I bring that up too is because when I talk about those kind of things, people like they're often looking for a root core issue of a disassociation from their true authentic self, or where they began to begin a routine of self-sabotage or self-hatred or whatever it may be. And when I talk about the education system and its function and how it works, and that's just a reality, that's just a psychological perspective of how a mind can be manipulated to believe it's not good enough. I mean, for sure, you can grade it and force it to take in mass amounts of education that, or information, sorry, that may not be beneficial to that individual right at that time. So they're confused. And people will say, yeah, like what a reference point, to be able to think from. Because for me, it's just all about the awareness, like we do know, I believe, that we're not well. I think that it's safe for us to say that, many of us are not feeling well, whether you're on medication, whether you're overweight, whether you're tired all the time, whether you're unhappy within your life and in your employment. We're not well. But even for myself, I wasn't well for many years. But to seek that answer of where it began is the way to begin to seek freedom.
And I personally think that the where it all began is in not knowing how to feel our feelings. So if we continue to stack on top of one feeling on top of another, it starts to get really heavy. I always like to use this as an example. Think of like an inverted pyramid, and you put like a brick at the bottom, and that's the first time that you had a negative feeling, a particular negative feeling. Maybe it's, I'm not good enough. So you have this not good enough feeling at the bottom of the stack. And then you put another brick the next time you feel it, and the next time you feel it, and the next time you feel it. And it's like the stack pointing down. All those times I didn't feel good enough on that very first situation that created that not good enough feeling. And then we get to adulthood and the weight is so heavy. And that's when we start looking for those numbing things. It can happen sooner than adulthood, of course, depending on, whatever kinds of traumas and situations that you've experienced. But that heaviness is overwhelming at that point. And that's why people just look for, I don't know what's wrong with me, but I don't feel well. Like you said, it can be physical, it can be emotional, it could be just feeling overwhelmed and stressed, but it's coming out because we haven't known how to address the emotions in the first place. Is there really something wrong with me? We walk around thinking that all the time, and it's not true. It's just that we haven't figured out how to actually access the solution.
Right. And I believe the normalcy of like generations before us not paying attention and communicating about their emotions because the desire and demand to always fit into this conformed box of what was normal and pretending that everything was okay in life so that others didn't judge you for what you didn't have together has just sort of we've come, 5 generations away from that practice of behavior where, my generation is feeling the effects of that, but the youth, well, we're all feeling the effects of it, but the youth now that are coming up within, this inability to process emotions over the last 5 generations, they're just at a breaking point. Like it's just come that far. We're passing this on genetically to each other, this dysfunction within the vibrational frequency of where we vibrate from just normally, so I think that looking to the past and seeing how the avoidance of emotions through generations have brought us to this point is a great place for us to be like, okay, we need to be accountable at this point for what has not been taking place for quite some time.
Yeah, it absolutely comes through generations because we are taught, when we're learning, from 5 to 8, we're learning from our authority figures. We're learning from our parents, our siblings, our grandparents, teachers. We are taking the information from those around us who are also storing their negative emotions. And so we're just learning, they're handing it down to us. But I do think it's in our DNA too. And that comes out when we have physical problems. We can actually change that. We can change our DNA when we process our feelings, and we can feel better and be much more well overall.
Yeah, I mean, people like the way I look today, I certainly didn't look like this 4 years ago. I probably looked 10 years older. That's the power of negativity and fear and stress and anxiety when that's the way it displays itself in the vessel. But again, today, here I sit here 4 years later, and I'm completely different in so many different ways. And I don't take any medication. My medication comes from nature. I drink clean water. My diet is something that I'm very conscious of. No chemical, no toxins. I look at the labels of the food that I eat. I take my sleep very seriously, and I process emotions in the moment. And I think if people, really knew the power of what they're tuning themselves into, this would become a far more common practice.
For sure. And, I like what you said about processing your emotions in the moment. I like to tell people, get it when it's a whisper, not
Yeah.
when it's screaming at you, get it when it's just first kind of starting to bubble up. And that's a lot of what I do in my practice, is to teach people, how do I notice when I'm having a feeling? And that's like, in my view, it's like noticing those sensations in your physical body, because your emotion is going to come out in a physical way. It could be a tightness in your throat, or heaviness in your chest, or an unease in your stomach, that nervous feeling if you're having anxiety, and starting to pay attention to those things and say, I'm having a feeling right now. Let me take a moment and ask myself what it is. Because a lot of times, if we can just acknowledge it, then we can avoid stuffing it down and just say, I do feel anxious today. Here's why I feel anxious, and kind of talk it out, whether it's with someone or just doing it on our own or journaling or something. But acknowledging it right in the moment, we don't have to wait until it's screaming at us and creating bigger problems.
Yeah, right. It's the avoidance of it altogether that just pushes us further away from the truth of it all. Like I know for me, like I'll give an example. I would be reactive when someone would try and control me. You know, just anything really, whether it was an establishment, an organization, anyone that was, you know, authoritarian, like a police or something like that was trying to control me. I would immediately become reactive. And even after I had had my transformation, it was still embedded in me. But I knew that when I was becoming reactive, that was trying to teach me something. So I was like, all right, so this situation of control has a reaction within me. Where does this stem from? So I took a minute and I started to follow it back. And my father and I always had a lot of difficulties when I was younger because he he very much did everything society had asked him to do. You know, he was a hard worker. He was the first guy on site. He was the last guy to leave. You know, that was his name. That was his identity, was his work habits. So he could be seen and heard in the workplace. So he in turn thought that this was what I needed in my life. But you know, I'm a free bird. You couldn't cage me. But he tried to. So control was implemented in my life at a very young age, where there was many doors that were being closed and not opened because of somebody else's belief system. So I blame my father for that for quite some time. And when I was able to take a step back and see the reactive nature of control within my body and within my being, I was able to look at my dad and say, okay, like my dad tried to control me all the time. Where do these parenting methods come from? Why is he like that? And there I was able to see that his father, you know, my grandfather, wonderful man, but he didn't have the tools and education of parenting because there is no manual for parenting. So he did the best he could with what he had, but he controlled my father. And my dad
Mhm.
picked up these behaviors and patterns, even though he told me later in life it was something he tried to avoid. But it became something that he knew because it was something that was practiced and normal. So here, I had all this resentment towards my father over his controlling nature, when in reality, it was just what he learned through his father as a parenting technique. So I was able to go to my dad and say to him, like, "Hey, man, you know, for a long time we never got along, and I'm finally able to understand you and see where you came from and why you did what you did, and I just want you to know, like, I love you for doing the best you could with what you had, and I see that, and I'm going to be better in my life to kind of break that. But I just want you to know that I see you and that I love you." And my dad, when I said that, he was like, "What? Like, where? How did you follow? Like, how did you do that? You know?" Because he was so relieved in his life that I had finally put the words together for something that he didn't have the language to tell me. So here we had a major conflict within our lives, but one of us just needed to do the work, you know, and I broke that generational trauma within one aspect of my life. Now, many of us are carrying generational traumas that look like control, that look like jealousy, or look like, you know, abandonment, or the need to be seen and to be heard. But if we follow that back to our childhood, we can learn from it and heal those areas. And that was what an area of healing looked like for me.
Yeah, I think you're so spot on, you know, this idea that we're all doing the best that we can, you know, even our parents. And a lot of times, you know, I'll be talking to someone and they'll be like, "Well, but my parents were wonderful." And I'll be like, "Yeah, and I understand that. They could be wonderful, but they could still have patterns and habits and ways of doing things that have been passed down that really weren't working for them." But our tendency is to just take on whatever we're shown and take it as our own, even if it feels wrong. And you start getting that sense too, that's like, that's not authentic to me, it doesn't feel right to me, but it's just what I've always done. So we're walking around in this kind of trance all the time, creating the same emotions, the same behaviors day after day, because it's what we've always known. And what you did is you said, no more. I'm not doing it anymore. I'm going to break that. And then by going back and telling your dad, you were able to help him break it too. You know, it takes one person in a family to be able to say, it's enough. And being that one is just, it's such a great thing to do, to just start healing your whole family, and people around you will start to want to heal because they're going to see what's coming from you and want that light back. You know, they're going to want that in them.
Absolutely. Like my family is no different than families all around the world. We do not talk about how we feel, and we own a cottage, which is like we've got a piece of land up in northern Ontario where, you know, all of my family members are able to be there. So I see a lot of my cousins and my uncles that I normally, families do not get together like we used to, but we have this place where we all do see each other often because it's where everybody goes for the summer. So no matter how disconnected we get over the years, we always connect back at this place. But when I, decided to be different, my family certainly knows about the drug addiction, and everyone saw like, Justin's choices in life. But then they saw a change in me, and they were kind of, they'd seen that maybe once or twice before, where, I tried to take some action in my life and it didn't work out because I hadn't healed. But then I began this journey of healing. And I started having these conversations with my father, and I would have open conversations with other of my family members where they were disconnected from themselves, and I was tuned into it. So I was okay to talk about difficult things. And like you say, my family was able to see, like, wow, Justin is talking about things that are helping people grow through difficult parts of their life, and all I did was become an example of what that could look like. And to see the change within your family is just, it's incredible, because from one point they're judging you, and they're like, what's this guy talking about, how long before he's back into drug addiction or whatever, right? But then you maintain, because you choose this thing that's not going to hold you back anymore, and that you're going to free yourself just by being honest and authentic. And that's all I tapped into, was my honesty and authenticity, because when I decided to make a choice, I was so tired of pretending to be somebody that I wasn't, just because I was too afraid to be myself, that I thought no matter how awkward I was, no matter how many mistakes I made, as long as I was taking steps in the right direction to find out who I was, that's what I was going to live for.
Yeah, that just makes me think of, I think it's Joseph Campbell. He said, a mind expanded can never snap back. So once you have seen it, you cannot turn back. You can't go back to what you were before. When you see the healing and the changes that can come by saying, here are my feelings, let me feel them, and let me start to understand who I authentically am. Going back to that fake person you were isn't even possible. It's like you couldn't possibly do it if you wanted to.
Yeah.
Do you feel that?
Yeah, once the light's on, there's no darkness anymore. That doesn't mean that life doesn't come with its difficulties, because it absolutely does. But you love through the highs as much as you love through the lows, because you see everything is trying to teach you about something and the world around you. So it's like you're learning about yourself through the lows. That's an opportunity for you to grow, because life's not always a straight line. And this is a thing that I believe we try to maintain, is this straight line within life. No matter what it takes, we're going to stay on that straight and narrow. Even if we're completely dismantled emotionally and physically, we'll maintain that we are on the straight line and doing everything that we're supposed to. Where, I just embrace every aspect of life. And actually, when you do that, it becomes so much easier, because you're like, okay, wow, like, all right, I'm learning about my relationship with money, because this is a big one. A lot of people are so afraid about how much money they have, and all everything like that. It's like, well, the fear that you instill within a relationship with money will be that of its reality. So if you're afraid of what you have in terms of finance, well, that's going to have power over your emotional stability. Whereas me, I look at it as an opportunity to really not let money have a power over me. And sure, okay, I was homeless for years and spent a lot of time in drug addiction, but that, being a drug addict and selling drugs, at times you can have a lot of money that comes very quickly and very easily. So, even in those areas of life, you do understand what it means to have abundance, and you understand what it means to not have it as well. But I think that that's all a teacher for us to learn about our place in this world.
And in that instance, you might have been having abundance, but you were having it at a great cost to yourself, So I think, your perspective now in saying your abundance really comes in being true to yourself and being authentic rather than what's in your bank account. And ironically, when you are in that authentic place, your bank account can grow because you're letting things come rather than living in that scarcity.
That's exactly it. That's exactly it. Now that I've put all of my attention inward and I no longer let the external world have an idea of or a belief system of fear within me, I create my own belief system of love that I live from my heart center. And love's not always easy. Love can be very difficult at times. You have to be very patient with love. So you begin to understand these things with love. But when you live from that place, yeah, people give you money for your authenticity. They want you around them. Like I own a construction company and I do not do business like 95% of the rest of the world. I just live my true authentic self. I'm not out there grinding all the time. I make connections and they're authentic because I'm real, because I'm just true. And a lot of the contractors that I work with, I mean, these are large companies. They know my past and they're okay with it because I speak about it with such confidence in the education that I learned to be the man that I am today, that they want to do business with me because of that. They're like, this guy just doesn't have anything that holds him back. He's okay to talk about all of the difficulties. He can walk in a room and light the room up just because he's just who he is. That's the guy we want to do business with and we want him around.
So true. Like if you show people who you are, they don't have to guess, and you're like, this has been my journey, but here I am now, and I'm being honest about it. And that makes people want to be around you. When you're being yourself, that is what makes people want to be in your circle and to give you business and to just be around you, just putting out that energy that says, I'm not afraid to be myself, which
Yeah,
is
and
what we should all strive for.
that you're right. And I think that, a lot of people when we begin this journey within and we want to be our authentic selves because I mean everyone wants that. I mean, let's be real. We all want that. We just don't know where to begin. And for me, the first understanding I had when I became a student of love was that I was going to make mistakes, but I wasn't going to let other people's judgment of me hold me back from learning about who I was because I knew if I was afraid to be myself or even try to be myself, then I would be living for others again. So I also remembered that there was 8 billion people on the planet. So every human that I would meet was just an opportunity for me to grow more into who I wanted to be and understand myself more, which means I said dumb things sometimes, like I talk quite a bit in my life and even in areas where I don't talk quite a bit. I would say things that I wasn't happy with how I would say them or how they would come out, or I would hesitate and hesitate and hesitate, and then I'd say the thing and I'd sound like a total dummy because I was so awkward when it finally came out because I'd been so disconnected from speaking my truth that when I'd stepped back into that power, it felt so foreign to me. So I just want people to understand that it is foreign in the beginning, and you do say things that don't always turn out the way you want them to. But anything you practice, you get good at. That's the only way to really step into your power and really understand what you're capable of doing and understand yourself is to make the mistakes along the way.
I think everybody, not everybody, you can't say everybody, but most people, at least that I've ever worked with, probably, yeah, I would say the greatest majority of them have always come with the sort of same fear or same issue. And that issue going back to not feeling good enough and accepting our worth. And so it does get scary to be authentic because we think we'll be rejected. Like when you were saying, if you said something and then you're like, oh, I wish I hadn't said that, or I shouldn't have said it that way, that's a scary thing. And so people avoid it, which is why we walk around pretending to be someone we're not, because we don't feel good enough as we are that we won't be accepted. But the irony in that is when we are authentic and true to who we are, that is when people want to be around us.
Right. And you're right. Rejection's major. It's major because we feel the need to be accepted. But here's another key piece of what I did in my life that helped me grow through that because acceptance is a huge one. But I just decided to accept myself because my belief system turned within myself. It was not in the belief in anyone else. It was just in me and what I could do. So I had accepted me and for all that I was. So that meant that some people did, not everyone's gonna like you. And it's not your job to have everyone like you. I mean, God, that's exhausting. It's exhausting to people please to that degree, yet it's so normal in life to do that. And when you're learning about yourself, everything leads from a place of love. Now, we don't always get that right. We don't always say the right things because we've got many poor behaviors and learned behaviors that are detrimental to our understanding of what love is for self and for others. But if we don't make mistakes to break those patterns and habits by trying new things, we'll never really understand what that is. So to understand that you will be rejected in some cases when you're learning about yourself and saying things that, you're trying to realign to a new philosophy, it'll happen. I mean, I lost, I'll be honest, there was people that I've met over the course of my 4-year journey here of learning about myself that are not within my field anymore. And they're not within my field anymore because I'm always evolving. I mean, if I look at myself who I was just 8 months ago, I'm a completely different guy because I'm always trying to tune into myself to a higher degree. I don't really reach the top of a mountain and then accept that as my pinnacle. I reach the top of a mountain and I'm at the base of a new one. I'm like, all right, well, mind, body, soul, man. Like, what do we need to work on? Where can we be better? And the continued growth of who we are and the love for self and others is our mission. So let's keep going.
Yeah, and like you said, the acceptance of being rejected by others is that is something that we should actually be like, I'm okay with that as long as I'm not rejecting me. And when we're pretending, then we're rejecting ourselves. And we need to really focus, when you say about, love being where we need to operate from, I agree 100%. And you've got to start with yourself. Because if you don't have that love and acceptance of who you are, then you can't really love and accept others, not in a genuine way, because you're walking around with those negative feelings about yourself all the time. And again, just kind of having that mask on, pretending.
Absolutely. Self-love, yeah, it is the actuality of the love for an understanding for another. Like, and if I ask people this, I'm like, do you know anything about self-love? No, I don't know nothing about it. And they're very quick to say that, and that's okay. The education system and our parents have lacked the understanding of the value of self-love because they've never learned it from these past generations. It's just something that's, not got a lot of attention. But when you look at it and you say, okay, well, like if I don't love myself, like then what is love? Like how would I know what love is if I don't have it for myself? And then my kids come and hug me and they tell me, that I tell them I love them, but I don't even know what it is because I don't love myself. Like that was a key essential piece of my evolution was when I say I became a student of love, it was to understand what love for myself meant. And rejection was a big part of that because I was going to understand that rejection would come from love because it was an individual that no longer needed to be within my community or within my space of shared time and energy. So I was able to love through that. So you use love as a tool, really.
Yeah. And sometimes, like when you said people don't know how to love themselves, I think there's a misconception too that loving who you are is somehow like narcissistic or, you know,
Right.
but that's a whole different thing. What I always tell people is self-love is quiet. It's between you and you. It's a conversation you're having within yourself. You're not out there bragging and boasting.
Right.
That's when the narcissism piece comes in. So people get a little scared about it, like, well, I shouldn't, that's conceited. I shouldn't love myself. No, that's a totally different thing. We want to love ourselves and accept who we are, faults and all,
Right.
so that we can, be out there for others and show and share that love with everyone.
Right. Like if there's areas you don't like about yourself, it's like, well, how are you going to grow through them? How are you going to heal those areas with love if you just avoid them and you find it selfish to take time to love yourself? I mean, self-love is just an ability to take time for yourself, go into areas where you feel reactive or you feel trauma or unprocessed emotions, go in there with love as a tool and find the education within it in the experience and heal that. And I mean, for many people, they're parents, it's like your job as a parent is just to be an example for what your children can use for tools and education to help them in their life. That's parenting. It's so much more than putting a house over your children and clothing with brand names on them and giving them the latest iPhone and video games and all this other crap that's detrimental to their growth. You know, you being an example is free, and it takes work for you to do, but that's kind of what we can live up to in this life as a legacy to leave behind for our children.
For sure. Yeah, absolutely. And asking them, regularly asking your kids like, how does this make you feel when they're experiencing something? But you should also be asking yourself that question. So by learning, how does this make me feel? And then asking them, how does that make you feel? Kind of going back to what we were talking about earlier in the education system and not knowing how to feel. It's very interesting if you ask somebody. And I think when you were talking about seeing your family at your cabin there, if you go up and you say to somebody, "Oh, I heard this happened to you. How does that make you feel?" People kind of go like deer in the headlights, like, "What, you want to know how that makes me feel?" Like,
Yeah.
what do you mean? Because I'm not sure I've thought about how that makes me feel. I've just decided to ignore it and push it under the rug or something. So being that example and asking how something makes someone feel is critical, I think.
Absolutely, and I think just the awareness in the awkwardness or how people do get taken back a little bit when you do ask them about how they feel is just a wonderful opportunity for us to see how much it does need communication within a community, and especially with our families. Like, I mean, if you are spending most of your time within your family, but you can't talk to your children and your husband about, the emotional traumas that you faced as a child, like, what is it? What's going on in that home? And I'll say this to parents, and it's very normal that we are not using these spaces and these people that we tell we love as an opportunity to talk about the things that held us back in our life so we can grow, because I mean that's the closest thing to you. So to be able to talk to your children about being human and making mistakes and having difficult experiences in life. I mean, that's the best education that you could give for a child. But as parents, you have this idea what it means to be a mom or what it means to be a dad. So it comes with a hierarchy, and then it comes with a title, and then it comes with a label. So now it comes with an ideology, when really the best form of parenting is to strip that all away and just be human, and show each other our flaws so that we can learn and grow from each other. And that's really where it can begin for you to step out in the real world as well.
Yeah, I think vulnerability is a very powerful tool. Just like you said with your business, when you're really open and upfront with people, that's probably a really vulnerable place to be, to say, "Hey, this is my past," but they're accepting you. So, people want that true vulnerability to be expressed. And I think ultimately we all want to be able to do that. Again, it goes back to fear. We're afraid to be vulnerable in that way. But like you said, in your home, if you're not doing that and not teaching your children to do that, then we're going to just keep on living out those same patterns again. So we've got to break it somewhere. We got to start asking people how they feel and be true and vulnerable.
And with parenting, I think like a lot of people do have the two cars in the driveway, they have the house, they have food in the fridge, kids go to a good school, yet no one's talking about how they're feeling. And it's like, well, if you look at the value of emotions and how that can affect the experiences and the choices that the child will make, that is the most valuable thing that you have in a home. So all of the materialism actually comes second to the ability to be able to talk about how you feel. So for people that are, parenting with not an abundance of financial wealth, look at what you do have. I mean, the value that you have to be a wonderful parent, to set your children up for the best experiences that they can have in this life, making the best choices that for their personal growth. You don't need money for that. And that's a huge misconception, that money is going to fix everything. Money actually causes more problems than it does blessings.
Yeah, it can if approached in that way that you were saying, like if they think, if someone thinks like, okay, because all the needs are taken care of, and they're not, because your emotional needs aren't, but if all your physical needs are taken care of, like I've done my job. And again, just the way that society has sort of taught people that we need to change that it's got to be your needs emotionally have to become center stage, not our needs, for finances. That stuff's great and wonderful, but I think it all ends up coming when we have the other things in alignment.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I just talk about that because I think that society does lead us to believe that success comes through an ideology of ones and zeros in a bank account, and the more wealth you have, the more successful you'll be in your life. But it's mind, body, soul, So certainly money is a tool, absolutely. But if we're not educating about how money can be used as a tool to redistribute wealth, and we're more so educating from the perspective that incurred wealth for just one individual is more beneficial. You're setting up individuals to believe in an egotistical way of life, and I think that when we're talking about ego and the imbalance of emotions within our life, that's exactly what we're talking about. The ego has been damaged in a way one doesn't believe that they're good enough, or from the other side of things, they believe they're better. So the real inner work begins when we're looking to balance the ego and rebuild a relationship with it in a new way.
Definitely. And as you know, we've talked about so much today, the emotions that are tied in, from our past experiences that we've avoided are what are creating those ego things going on in us, or the lack of, self-esteem and self-worth. And we've just got to start acknowledging what we feel in life and processing it, so that way we can get free of our cage, so that we can get out there. Got to put my plug in there.
Yeah, no, for
Free
sure.
from the cage. But yeah, that's ultimately, what we should be striving for, is when we have that emotional freedom and that true deep self-worth and the ability to really be authentic, everything else just falls in alignment, and generosity comes. If you do have financial wealth, that generosity piece is there when the ego is not controlling everything.
Absolutely. I know with everything I do in my life that my focus now and where I will put my time, energy, and attention with my money is to building schools of consciousness where we're able to, just like you said, teach children the value in processing emotions and understanding who they are and living with their truth and authenticity at the forefront of everything they do. So their decisions are valid and their choices will come with consequences, but we can learn in a group setting of what that looks like. So we do realize that making mistakes is how we're going to learn and how we're going to grow. And then we learn the value in individuals' experience. So we're a collective of humans are all experiencing life in their own way. We can learn from each other through that to grow quicker with as a collective. And I mean, community is the thing we teach. Sustainability is the thing we teach. Equality, but we don't just teach that to the children. I believe we got to teach that to the parents as well, because it has to be generational so that we have the guides coming up under the same philosophies. But it's not just my belief system, it's an awareness of self. So the child or the parent, they will come into an awareness of self and love and lead from that example, because I don't want anyone to follow me. I mean, I've done the work within myself from my experience, but we all have to do this within ourselves and just have more examples of what that looks like.
Yeah, you're so right, and it's good to have someone maybe walking beside you. That's what I always like to say to people. Like, I'm not going to do the work for you. I'm going to walk beside you, and I'll help you, but it's ultimately got to come from finding that piece of self-worth and love within yourself. And then you'll be able to, put that out for others and be a guide to somebody else. Then, that I think we're all just kind of like the saying goes, walking each other home. We're trying to be there to help each other grow and expand in this life.
Yeah, and I just want to put in here, like when it comes to energy, a lot of us are in lower vibrational frequency. People feel down. That's anxiety, stress, and fear. These are dense, energetic emotions that we store within the body. So to tap into a higher vibrational frequency, a higher awareness of self, you really got to take a look at the things that you feed your mind and the community that you spend your time with. Because if you're taking in, scary movies all the time, or news, social media that's debilitating to your growth and having you feel afraid all the time, you're going to practice these behaviors subconsciously. You're storing this information within yourself. And a big part of how I set myself free was I removed all of those distractions from life, because I wasn't going to let anyone else think for me anymore. I had to be able to think for myself. And that looked like me sitting in stillness and doing that and evaluating myself and my thoughts for what I felt. And that was a great way for me to tap back into my feelings. And the second thing I did was take a look at the community of individuals I had around me. If I was hanging around a lot of people that were found it acceptable to be judging other individuals, well then of course I'm going to practice this behavior to fit in with them. So I quickly removed all of that from my attention, and I gave it no more energy to be doing that. And that again meant I was going to sit with stillness and evaluate who I was and recalibrate my vibrational field, because I was no longer going to be afraid, and I was no longer going to be judgmental towards myself or anyone else. So right there, we're tapping into an energy that will change your frequency to attract other like-minded individuals. And I just wanted to put that in there because I think it's important, when we are looking to take this journey within, to attract ourselves to positive growth applications that'll help us achieve what we desire quicker.
Yeah, I love how you made a conscious choice to take the numbing agents away, the movies, social media or whatever. Like, not to say that we have to take all of that away, but sometimes maybe for a period of time we do, in order to have the quiet to figure out really what's going on inside of us. But making that conscious choice to change, because again, got to get out of that trance. If we're walking around in a trance of every day experiencing the same things repeatedly and the same emotions, of course we will have the same day in some way, shape, or form over and over and over again.
Yeah.
So the only way to shift that is, like you said, to sit in the stillness, to say, I'm going to acknowledge what I feel right now, instead of continuing to go through the same repeated behavior again and again.
Yeah, I appreciate you so much for your insights, for your clarity, for your book, Free from the Cage, Jennifer Riggs. Where do people find this book?
It is available on my website, at jennifer-riggs.com. And you can find me on social media, Jennifer Riggs Mindset Coach on Facebook. And I've got a YouTube channel as well. So Jennifer Riggs, you can just look for me there. But anyway, I appreciate you so much. I really love, having this conversation with you and just seeing the amazing things that you're doing with your life. And it's just really wonderful to know that there are others that want to have the same, results in the world for everyone.
Yeah, this podcast has been absolutely incredible, an absolutely incredible tool for me to connect with like-minded individuals and bring this awareness of community and connection to a platform, and to be able to share that other people are listening to because they're finding value in it, because we're two individuals that are able to step out and have difficult conversations about taboo subjects that many people are feeling, and they're looking for growth. So yeah, I appreciate you as well, just as much for, being here at this difficult time, and being a bright light in dark places. So I'll put all your links below, and if people want to get in touch with you for coaching, or check out your YouTube channel, or get your book, I'll have all that in the description below. And please, this is how we grow. We just take chance on yourself and live life to its absolute fullest with your authenticity and truth. Thank you so much, Jennifer, for being here today.
Thank you, Justin. Really appreciate you. Thanks.